Hi, this is Kim Breeden at Minnesota Online High School. In this video, we're going to learn how to factor quadratic trinomials using trial and error. First, let's understand what factoring means. Factoring is the opposite of FOIL. So in our previous assignments, we started with two sets of parentheses and we multiplied to get them in expanded form. In this problem, we're going to do the opposite direction. We're going to start with this expanded form, something like x squared minus x minus 20, and we're going to get it to look like that in two factors. So in today's problems, we're going to be doing factoring where our expanded form always has a 1 or just a plain x squared. And we're going to factor this essentially using trial and error. But there is some system to figure out what numbers work. Our goal is to write it in this form, where we have two sets of parentheses, x plus something times x plus something. Now, the general idea is that we're going to find two numbers that multiply to equal the last term. So that multiply to equal c, but that add to equal our middle term, that b. This is going to be some trial and error. But the nice thing is we can always check using FOIL. So there is some guidelines and logic that's going to make this trial and error part easier. So what we're going to do is we're always going to start by looking at this last number. In this case, plus 20. We're going to list all pairs of numbers that multiply to equal 20. I think this is easiest to do if you use a logic and some patterns. So for example, you're always going to have 1 and that number. So 1 and 20. Then I like to work up. So 1 worked, so 2 also goes in. 2 and 10 would give me 20. 3 does not work. 4 goes into 20. 4 and 5 gives me 20. And I know I'm done, that there are no other options because 4 and 5 are right next to each other. So I listed all my potential factors. Now I want to find which pair of these adds to equal 9. Well, adding 4 plus 5 equals 9. That's the factors we're going to use. So in our factored form, we're going to put those in the last spots of our parentheses. So my factored form is x plus 4 times x plus 5. That would be my answer. Now we can check this using FOIL. So FOIL says we multiply the first. X times x is x squared. Outside, x times 5 is 5x. Inside, 4 times x is 4x. Last, 4 times 5 is 20. When I combine those, I get x squared plus 9x equals 20. In our last example, we had all positive terms. But what happens when the middle term is negative, but the last is positive? Well, this means that both of our factors will be negative. And the reason this works is because a negative times a negative equals a positive number. A negative plus a negative equals a negative number. In this page, we're going to factor x squared minus 7x plus 6. Since my middle term is negative and my last is positive, I'm going to need to use two negative numbers that multiply to equal 6. So again, we're going to list all of our options. Negative 1 and negative 6 would equal 6. Negative 2 and negative 3 would also equal 6. Now for my middle term, I want the pair that adds to equal negative 7. In this case, it would be negative 1 and negative 6. I can put those factors in the last spots of my parentheses. So my factored form is x plus -1 times x plus -6. Again, you can use FOIL to check this. I'm going to skip that for time's sake. So another option that might happen is that our last term is negative. This is often the trickiest one because one factor must be negative and one will be positive. This is because a negative times a positive equals a negative. Now, if we're looking for a negative in the middle, our bigger number will be negative and the smaller factor will be positive. If we're looking for a positive in the middle, the bigger number is positive and the smaller is negative. You'll notice there's a lot of different combinations. This is why it's called trial and error. You're probably not going to guess right the first time. You might have to use FOIL to double check and try again. But the more you practice, the easier these become. So here we have x squared minus 2x minus 15. We're going to start by looking at our factors of 15. So my factors of 15, 1, oops, I don't like the color. So 1 and 15. 2 does not work. 3 works. 3 and 5. Those are my only factor options. Now my middle term, I'm looking for things that add together to equal -2. So I want to make my bigger term negative, since I'm looking for a negative, and I want to see which pair adds to equal -2. Well, 3 and -5 equals -2. I'm going to put those in the last spots of the parentheses. So my factored form is x plus 3 times x plus -5. Let's look at one last example. X squared plus 7x minus 8. I'm looking for numbers that multiply to equal 8. So 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Now my middle term is positive, but my last term is negative. So one of those is going to have to be negative, but the smaller one should be negative since I need a positive in the beginning. So I'm going to make the smaller one negative, and I'm looking for which pair will add to equal 7. Well, -1 plus 8 gives me 7. So my factored form is x plus -1 times x plus 8. Factoring by trial and error gets easier the more you do. You'll probably get good at seeing these factors in your head. If not, it's okay. Use those step-by-steps and use a real methodical method, and you'll get that. As always, please reach out if you have any questions. You can do this. Have a great day.